The weather looks better away across there.
It does. That leads us into Coolin Forest.
So is that the east over there?
No, that's south again.
That's south.
This is east. West is over there where the sun is.
Well, one of the things about Scotland is I lose my bearings here very quickly because the roads wind so much.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be going north-south 1 minute and east-west the next. Careful of this bridge now. Not at all safe, that bit there.
Don't lean against it.
No, I think you're very wise.
Yeah. That's a splendid view, isn't it? That's Ben A. And the top of it, which is about 5 miles long, is completely covered with a quartzite scree. It's loose, it's difficult to walk upon. There are beautiful mountains here. And they're a very useful stalker's path for getting around. There is a right-of-way and it's a beautiful walk. The thing to do, really, is to walk with another party and each park the car at either end and walk in opposite directions and swap the car keys, you see. Get back to base in the other's car. One of my favourite parts of the district is this. The silence of these places gets a bit frightening sometimes. Looks like a no man's land, but it's actually teeming with life. A wonderful sanctuary for animals, isn't it?
It is. You might want to. Here's a nice dry spot. We'll have ourselves a bit of a sit down.
We're going to relax a bit.
Why not?
Nice. Good enough to chew.
I bet there was many a day when you weren't as lucky with the weather as this.
There were a few days, but generally I did very well in Scotland.
So when you'd taken your photographs on a place like this, I mean, you would go home from your week's trip and then... How long
take them to Boots.
How long afterwards did you actually get around to doing the drawings? I mean, would that be sort of winter evenings job, was it, when you couldn't get out to walk?
Well, it was, yes, but for 20 years I've been taking photographs and not doing any drawings. But fortunately, I'd had them all enlarged by a professional photographer. So they were there waiting to be done when I came to draw them.
So do we carry on walking across that hillside over there as well?
Probably not do that today, but I do want you to see a valley up there, Glen Dewick. It's across the valley. We're now going to enter Agnoshellic Forest, which extends on both sides of the railway and the road. And going up through there is a forest road that leads into Glen Dewick.
South, there lies a wilderness of mountain and deer forest, uninhabited and rarely visited. A few solitary shooting lodges approached by rough tracks are the only visible evidences of man's occupation. There is neither accommodation nor hospitality for walkers and climbers. This is Morna, one of the least accessible regions in Scotland. Only walkers experienced in rugged and hostile terrain should venture far amongst the mountains of Morna.
I'll go and see if... check we've got no trains on the way, AW. Just hang on a second, I'll just... We all right?
This is the great lifeline between east and west. Inverness, Kyle of Lochhouse. Been under threat of closure for many years, but they keep deferring it, and it's still a very, very popular line. And the people on the villages of Plotton and so on depend on it.
Yeah.
So I think...
Well, when you look at how bad the roads are...
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
A bit muddy around here.
Oh, there was talk of closing the line and improving the road, but that was never adopted. Feel sorry for trees when they're grown like that. You never get a chance.
Well, that's
It's just like growing telegraph poles. Do you regard match stems as litter? I never regard them as litter, do you?
No, I don't.
No, just throw them down anyway.
I think the odd matchstick's not going to make much difference. Well, it's much more pleasant out of the forestry, I've got to say.
Yeah. And this track
That's
continues
marvellous.
about another 3 miles to a shooting lodge. That's the reason for its existence here.
Just look at that, though.
That's magnificent, isn't it? Those are the mountains of Coolin Forest. And beyond those, but not visible from here, are the mountains of Torridon.
Do these peaks have individual names, or is it actually
yes.
all one mountain?
No, there are 6 Munros there in that group. 6 mountains over 3,000 feet, and each quite individual. I mean, you can't climb one and then just walk across to the next. You've got to go down again and up again. It's really a plateau that's dissected by glens, and the deep glens too. Probably at one time it was all an even mass.
And if the view's as good here, as we climb on up, it's bound to get better, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mind you, we're pretty close to the cloud base up here.
Yes.
Presumably most of the time you came to Scotland, it was fairly cloudy, rainy weather. I mean, Scotland's mainly like that, isn't it?
I could always depend on 3 good days in a week, and the other 3 were probably cloudy. Days like that were very disappointing. Days like this were a great reward, though.
You must have been tempted from time to time to say, oh, hang getting the McBrain's bus, I'll just stay on for another few days.
I couldn't afford to do that. Holiday times were very fixed. It was a week. So Sunday to Saturday, and I had to be back. But since moving into the Lake District, of course, I never minded going back, because that's equally beautiful.
When you went home from a place like this to the lakes, though, I mean, you must have felt that the lakes was an awfully spoilt place.
To some extent, and an awfully flat place, too. It's surprising.
Great natural swimming pool down there, AW.
Yeah. Typical Highland burn. Beautiful. And you can be sure nobody's ever bathed in it. Now, if that was within 5 yards of Hyde Park, it'd be full of people, wouldn't it?
What was your first impression coming to this very different sort of landscape?
Oh, I thought it was wonderful. Nothing like this in the Lake District, actually. It's far wilder, far grander than the Lake District. But as I say, it hasn't the romantic beauty of the Lake District, which appealed to me first of all.
So you never thought of applying for the job of town clerk of Fort William, so you could be on the doorstep of this sort of landscape?
No, I was satisfied to stay in the Lake District. No, that never appealed to me. I couldn't live here.
Why not?
Well, I'm fond of solitude and loneliness, but you get rather too much of it. I like to still go and watch Blackburn Rovers twice a year, and I like the Lake District.
You probably wouldn't get a very good picture for Coronation Street on the telly if you lived in a valley like this either.
No.
From the mountains of Torridon and the Coolin Forest, our path was south to Loch Alsh and Loch Dewick. We were tramping the road to the Isles in search of a particular place that had special memories for Wainwright.
The road to the Isles reaches its final stages at the watershed of Cluny, and from here to the western coast, the scenery is a fitting climax to a grand and memorable Highland journey. Lovely though Loch Dewick is, and lovely though the contributing valleys are, it is the mountains that make the scenery here so magnificent. The five sisters of Kintail, elegant and yet powerful, form a graceful and imposing background at the head of the loch, and their steep slopes border Glen Shiel for several miles, like a gigantic wall.
We're now at the summit of the Mamratigan Pass, and a couple of centuries ago this was the only road to Skye. It leads you to a ferry, Kyle Ferry, with Skye only 500 yards on the other side. And that, at one time, was the usual way to Skye.
So this was the narrowest crossing from the mainland to Skye?
Yes, yes, took advantage of that. What we're looking at is the area known as Kintail. The loch below is Loch Dewick. Now, a Mr. Percy Unna, who was a president of the Scottish Mountaineering Club, a great climber actually, bequeathed all his estate to the National Trust, with certain conditions which have been faithfully observed ever since. There was to be no afforestation, no signposts, no waymarking, no paths made. It was to be left exactly as it was at the time he'd bequeathed it. The whole area is open to walkers and climbers. The motorists have no access to it at all. And it's now managed by an employee of the National Trust.
Wainwright wanted to see these mountains at close quarters, off the tourist route, from the tranquillity of Glen Leekt, and in the company of that man from the Scottish National Trust. Alan Whitfield, one-time airline pilot, brought up in the Lake District, is now the guardian of the Glen. But even this place, behind its fortress of mountains, has been swept by change.
I think there was probably between 200 and 300 people living in this glen.
And they were cleared to make room for sheep
to make room for the sheep, yes. You can actually find and identify 7 crofting communities in the length of this glen from ruins. But as I say, they're all...
Now there's nothing.
Now there's nothing. Yeah. Nothing but space out of doors. It was the border sheepmen that took over these estates. And at the peak of the sheep boom, there was over 10,000 sheep on Kintail. And what's quite interesting also, considering that this was well over 100 years ago, they were paying £6,000 a year rent for the grazing here. Now, £6,000 in the 1840s, 1850s was a lot of money, you know. People come here who've walked in the Lake District and say, well, I'm used to walking in the Lake District. There is nowhere, I think, in the Lake District that one goes from virtually sea level up to over 3,000 feet in one go. You see, here we're standing, Glenleat House is, I think, about 330 feet above sea level. So you're starting even here.
With a 3,000-foot climb.
3,000-foot climb. And people do tend, when they come here, to underestimate how long it's going to take them. They think they're going to travel far faster. And we normally tell people now to allow in these hills 2 miles an hour and another hour for every 1,000 feet they climb. And then they're on the safe side. But the other thing, of course, in comparison with the Lake District today, is that we don't have as many people.
But are the numbers of people increasing?
The numbers of people are increasing. I think the numbers coming are doubling every year at the moment, actually out onto the hills. And the increase in wild camping is tremendous. The number of people now who are going off for 2 or 3 days at a time and camping out in the corries, which is a nice thing to see, as long as they remember to clean up after them.
Today's memorial to man in the hills may be the ubiquitous beer can and crisp paper, but it's the prints of man from another age that stamp a sense of mystery on the landscape, a spirit of endurance and inventiveness. A.W. wanted to show me one such signpost to the past, a monument near Glen Elg that's glowered at Highland wind and weather for nearly 2,000 years.
Well, this is the best surviving example of an Iron Age broch in Scotland. And this is Duntell. Built for defensive purposes, because there's a small entrance into which the homesteader could put his family and his few sheep and cattle.
And that was when there were raids?
Raids by the Vikings, yes. The age is attributed to the 1st century BC. So it's 2,000 years since that was built. Now that's the only entrance.
Oh, looking up there, you can see what a job it would have been to try and scale it.
Oh yes, quite impossible.
The wall seems to actually come out again at the top, slightly.
Yeah. And inside you'll notice it's a double wall into which the settler and his family could conceal themselves, so that the locals would position themselves up there and they could stop anybody coming in with stones and staves.
Would there have been a roof on this, do you think?
No, no roof. Unfortunately, you'll notice that the far side of the broch is gone. It's been used as a quarry by local people. But in its heyday, it must have been quite an impressive structure.
Must have been, mustn't it?
Yeah. Surprising to think that people were settled here 2,000 years ago, isn't it? But obviously they were, and subject to attack by the Vikings. Oh, it's very cleverly done.
Let's see there. Is that an entrance to the wall passage?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a staircase on the other side there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. You could walk around between the two walls.
So I suppose this would be living accommodation if they were
Yes.
in here for any time.
Yes.
There's no sign of a well.
There's no well here. Some have wells. There isn't one here. So they weren't built for a permanent occupation. I mean, they're just temporary defences.
Regular visitors to these parts over many years have witnessed a succession of changes that have taken place in the causes of tourism and economic development, and are saddened. The replacement of the old narrow road by a fast highway and the consequent increase in tourist traffic have robbed this district of its former loneliness and sombre atmosphere. In earlier days, one met only Highlanders, quiet, courteous, and welcoming. Mercifully, the mountains remain magnificently aloof. They cannot be changed.
I remember walking through the woods from Shieldaig one day, and by the time I got to Annet, I was pretty hungry. Nobody said meals, no cafes, nothing like that.